One of the things that we have tried to do in your worship book is to put these devotionals together for you so that you might have a model for something that you could take back and use in your congregations with your various ministries in various ways. And so I hope you take these as resources. They were lovingly put together with the Church of West Virginia Conference in mind. So this is one of the gifts of this team to you as members of the conference. We turn again this morning to Dr. Dotson, and didn't he do a great job yesterday? Several of you have asked if you could get copies, if the presentation, if his teaching yesterday would be available, and it is available. It will be available on stream on the conference website. So you have that to go back, to look at, to use in your congregations, to study and to have. And last night, his message on the green out there, wasn't that great? I have to tell you, Dr. Dotson, you know, last night there was a lay member of the body that came up to me and had a glory sighting where he said that there was somebody who came to talk to him about feeling a call of God to enter ministry on his heart. And that lay person took that person to another person, and then they prayed together for this gentleman's call into ministry.
Praise God. Praise God.
It's amazing things can happen. And we never know how and when the witness is going to stick. And so we look forward to hearing from you again this morning.
Thank you, Bishop. That's part of the organic nature of ministry. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning. It is so good to see you this morning, and I greet you in the strong name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus the Christ. I trust you had a restful and peaceful night of sleep. Amen? Just get your juices going on before I begin this morning. I want you to turn to your neighbor, and I want you to share one thing, just one thing you remember from yesterday's teaching. All right, just one thing. I know it's been a long day overnight. Just can you remember one thing from yesterday? Just turn to your neighbor and share. All right. Who's willing to shout out, give some shout outs to some one things you learned? Remember your why, all right? Make disciples. Huh? Yes, got to touch first base. Intentional discipleship. Got to touch first base, right. All right, good. Looks like y'all remember some things. That's good. That's good. So if you remember yesterday, we talked about the personal dimension of discipleship, and we talked about your commitment, right? That your commitment as a growing, maturing disciple of Christ was vital, right, to any effective, intentional system of discipleship. And I can tell you this, that in all of my years of leading, and particularly in pastoring, when there were moments in ministry when, we go through seasons of ministry, and there are seasons where things are great. There are seasons when things are not so great. There are seasons where you feel very encouraged. There are seasons when you feel not so encouraged. And it was in those moments, especially in the moments of discouragement, that I had to get reconnected to my why and to remember the call that God had placed on my life. And I'll never forget being at a conference. I don't remember exactly who said this to me, but I was at a conference, and he was talking about particularly pastors. Pastors, shout out to the pastors, all the pastors, yes, pastors. Pastors, y'all know how we can be sometimes in worship, right? Sometimes we can get fixated on the things of worship when things aren't going well, if somebody missed a note or the temperature is not quite right, or, hey, that's what the song we planned, or, hey, what's going on with the soundboard today, those sort of things. And I remember this leader, he said, I want you to remember, Junius, that when you are in worship, that you should worship. And I want you to remember that when you're in the sanctuary, that nobody needs Jesus more than you do. And so in those moments when I was feeling discouraged, I would just be in the sanctuary and I would remember those words, and immediately it would draw me back into the presence of God. So we talked about that personal dimension of discipleship. Then we talked about the corporate dimension of discipleship. And that's everything a church does to provide opportunities for people to grow in their faith. And then we made this shift into helping you to understand the initiative around See All the People. In my travels to Johannesburg, South Africa, I learned this greeting called Sawubona. Remember Sawubona? Can you say that? Sawubona. Sawubona. It's a greeting that is particularly used, particularly in the northern tribe, the NATO tribes, and it means, I see you. We see you. And the traditional response to Sawubona is, Yebo, Sawubona. All right, so let's practice. Sawubona. Okay, your response is Yebo, Sawubona, all right? Sawubona. All right, and you know what that means? It means I see you too. Seeing is a dialogue. It is an invitation to participate in another's life. I see you means that I acknowledge the dignity of your existence. I see you means that I underscore the belief that you, the person before me, is created in the image of God. I see you, Sawubona. Yebo, Sawubona. See all the people. And so See All the People really is designed to be the big front porch to intentional discipleship. It is designed to help congregations begin this conversation about engaging folk in the community, much like you did last night, to engage folk who are currently outside of the church, particularly people who claim no religious preference and or consider the church to be irrelevant. See All the People is a movement. And so we've been going for this movement started about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, and we've created discussion starter videos and free Bible study downloads, but an attempt to inspire every local church to stay relentlessly focused on making disciples of Jesus Christ, not by accident, but in a very intentional way. How many of you remember the call to action? Remember, I know Bishop remembers the call to action. Man, there was a lot of energy exerted around the call to action. I mean, really, the majority of the church mobilized around the call to action. What was the call to action? The call to action was about a pastoral and clergy partnership. Call to action was about creating small groups in congregations. The call to action was about creating effective children's programs in the congregation. The call to action was about outreach. And can I tell you, for about 4 or 5 months, there was actually an uptick in all of those statistics following the call to action. Then after about 6 months, we went on to business as usual. Right? Why? Because we were focused on the technical aspect of trying to fix the church. And we neglected the very reason why those things were indicators of vitality, not drivers of vitality. Right? And so when we think about see all the people, I said, what would happen if our church really would stop fixing churches and would really be relentlessly focused on this task of making disciples? So we've created these discussion videos, and we just finished a new one a few weeks ago. And of course, if you've seen any of these videos, you know that the language, it borrows language from the children's Sunday school rhyme, which says, here's the church, here's the steeple, open the doors, and see all the people. Let's take a look at the Anna video.
is in a stream. The ocean called for you and me. Still, I'm in this game, but without my closest friend. It's leaving now. I waited here, but nothing came. So I close my eyes, 'cause you reflect in everything.
Here's the church. Here's the church. Here's the steeple. Here's the steeple. Open the doors
Open the door
and see all the people.
and see all the people.
Please stand. The God of all grace, who has called us to eternal glory in Christ,
Discipleship begins with relationship. Get started at seeallthepeople.org.
Amen. Discipleship begins with relationship. So engagement, missional engagement, involves initiating, building relationships. Engagement seeks to ensure that outreach and evangelism get married, that they are a part of an intentional system of discipleship. In other words, the church does not undertake outreach to provide ministry for people, but rather to be in ministry with people, right? Whether your church's outreach is missional or evangelistic in nature, its effectiveness depends on being intentionally designed with engagement and relationship building in mind. So discipleship begins with relationship. So take an event like last night, perfect example. Did you have a great time last night, by the way? Wasn't that an awesome event last night? Yeah, it was awesome. So how would you take that type of event back to your local church, right? You could do it on a smaller scale, but you could still approximate a model what was done last night, which was essentially bringing people together in community and allowing people the opportunity to connect, right? To connect with their neighbors and those sort of things. So what were some things that you noticed about last night or the planning of last night, right? There was opportunities to get information from people, right? Well, how did you get information from people? You had these little drawings, these giveaways, these Walmart cards, right? So people fill out these cards. Now, I didn't know the actual card that people filled out, but you could be more intentional about the card that people fill out, that you could actually ask them some very specific questions that would serve as the foundation or the basis for you following up post that event. That's one thing. Number two, it's like you could have a team of people whose only responsibility at that particular event would be to just go talk to people, right? So engaging in relationships from that perspective. And then, of course, the most important aspect of that would be what would you do with the follow-up? What would happen after the event? And oftentimes, we plan great events, right? But it's the follow-up that makes the most significant difference, right? Discipleship begins with relationship. What does that mean to you? Just turn to your neighbor and reflect on that phrase. What does that mean to you, that phrase? Discipleship begins with relationship. What does that say to you? All right? All right? So that's one of the foundational principles, because as you think about this big front porch, you're creating opportunities, you're creating space. Spoke with the pastor of the First Church here in this town, and last night we were talking, and he said there were a lot of folk from the community that he has seen at various, events that his church has done. They come periodically, right? That becomes the beginning of that relationship. And those relationships get cultivated. And as those relationships get cultivated, there becomes opportunity, space for people to be able to share their stories, or people to be able to accept their call to ministry. Discipleship begins with relationship. I was ordained a deacon. This is when we had a two-step ordination process. I was ordained a deacon in the Central Texas Conference. I was ordained an elder in the California-Nevada Annual Conference. Shortly after I was ordained a deacon, I was a student at the Perkins School of Theology. I was on campus one day on my way to class, minding my own business, and I hear this voice yelling at me from across the campus, and he said, "Hey, are you gonna come talk to me?" And I looked and I said, "Well, who are you?" And walked up to him and he introduced himself, and he says, "My name is Ron Swisher, and I am district superintendent for the California-Nevada Annual Conference." I said, "Wow, oh, so what are you doing here?" He says, "We're recruiting students, right, to come to California." I said, "Yeah, I didn't even know that we recruited folk." You recruit folk? This is fascinating to me, right? He said, "So you want to come talk to me?" I said, "Well, I got to go to class. After class, I'll come and talk to you." So I go to class, and after class, I go and talk to district superintendent, and he starts telling me about California-Nevada Annual Conference. Now, look, I was sold on California. I just love California. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful country. Had family there in Oakland, and so I spent a lot of summers in California. So the opportunity to go to California was like, wow, I always wanted to live in California. But one of the reasons that things that really intrigued me about this conversation was he said, "Well, Junius, one day, our annual conference hadn't started a new church in probably about 20 years, but we're making plans to start a new church." And I said, "Wow." And he said, "You could possibly be that person." And I thought, wow, that would be a great opportunity to do that. So I said, yeah. So I ended up going to California, started off as an associate pastor at Jones Memorial in San Francisco. And after about 4 years, I got the call from the bishop to say, "We're ready to go start this new church." So I was finally given that opportunity. And when I was appointed to start the new church, it did not have a name, right? So we had no name for the new church. And then when we got to annual conference, we still did not have a name for this new church. But I'll never forget, Bishop Talbert was the bishop at the time, and Bishop Talbert was reading the appointments for annual conference that year. You know how they read appointments for annual conference? He said, like, Steve Spencer, Jones Memorial, San Francisco. Dale Weatherspoon, First Church, Palo Alto. And then he got to my name and he said, "Junius Dotson, Silicon Valley." I was appointed to the whole region. But what a helpful way of thinking about ministry. What a helpful way of thinking about the role of the church in the life of the whole community. And when we started Genesis, there was not a whole lot anywhere around about new church start training. Path 1 did not exist. There was not a lot of training at all. As a matter of fact, I was trained as a community organizer, right? So my training to start Genesis really came in the field of community organizing. So I was trained as a community organizer. And one of the primary or basic premises of community organizing is how do you connect with people? How do you build relationships? How do you bring people together? How do you connect people? And how do you help them understand how they can work together to make progress on issues that we care about, right? That's the basic premise of community organizing. So I took that premise and said, well, I can apply this to starting a new church, right? I don't know anybody here, so how do I connect with people in the life of this community? That's how we started, right? Now, I want to suggest to you that every church had a beginning. Next slide. Every church. Those who assembled had to determine how to engage the community. They had to determine how do we reach people for Christ. How do we do that in the life of this community? And that's the thing called birth. That's the introductory stage, birth. So birth happens. So you figure out how you connect with the community. And as you connect with the community, people start coming, right? People become a part of this community. And as people become a part of this community, you're in the introductory stage, you begin to grow. Well, guess what happens when a church begins to grow? It has to create systems. What type of systems does it create? Well, it creates systems in order to disciple people. Well, people are coming. Well, how do we, help them grow in their relationship with Christ? How do we help them learn how to share their faith? How do we teach them the spiritual habits, right? How do we help them discover their gifts so that they can find their place in this ministry so that they can do what? Just maintain the place? No, so that they can be a vital part of helping others come to be a part of this growing community. So you begin to grow, and then you begin to sustain growth, right? So this is going pretty well for a while. Things are happening, and Bible studies are going on, and small groups are happening, and people are engaged, and worship is really focused. The thing about a new church start is a new church start understands that it has to stay focused on the community. That's its only shot. It has to stay focused on its core mission. It has to stay focused on why it exists, and they do a pretty good job of that. And then something begins to happen over time. Over time, they begin this plateau because they begin to mature. They begin to mature. And I can tell you in my own experience dealing with new church starts, that once a church moves out of the mission field and into a building, right, things begin to change. People get real comfortable, right? Comfortable. I was meeting with one of the bishops in South Africa, and he was talking about how they do new church starts there, and he said they delay churches getting buildings as long as they possibly can. Why? Because when churches move into comfortable spaces, right, they begin to take their eye off of that core mission. This is what begins to happen. Churches begin to plateau, maturity stage. Then they move to the decline stage, sustained decline, and then eventually death. And this is what I want you to see about this diagram. If you see birth, if you were to replace or put right in parentheses by the term birth, why? Right? The why, right? Very, very clear. We're very, very clear why we're here, right? We don't exist. We're very, very clear. We're here for one reason. Right, to invite people into a relationship with Christ. For one reason, right, to help build the body of Christ. That we know why we exist. Now, that's the why, that's the birth stage. Now, when you get over to the decline stage, look how far we have wandered from the why. Now, I want you to just turn to your neighbor and look at this life cycle of the church and share with your neighbor where your church is in this life cycle. All right.
check this out. One Matters comes up.
Can you do it?
I can. You want me
Yes.
to call you up?
I'll come up and present it. I'll let you do the talking.
Okay, cool.
All right. Did some of y'all debate where you were? We used to do this when I used to do staff retreats. When I was pastoring St. Mark, we used to do this regular. I used to put this slide up regularly for our staff and then for our leaders to try to figure out, to answer this question. It was always interesting to me that for the people that were involved in the programmatic aspects of the church, I mean, we were always like in that sustained growth stage, right? But for the folk, the administrative folk, particularly the finance folk, well, we were like almost dead, okay? It's a different perspective. It's a different way of seeing it. Here's the good news. Here's the good news. Wherever you are in the life cycle of the church, rebirth can happen. Somebody ought to praise God for that. Rebirth can happen. Rebirth happens when a congregation intentionally decides that it is going to reconnect and re-engage with its community. It is going to rediscover its why. Now, I also want to suggest to you that you may be part of a church that's growing and vibrant, because I've done some trainings this year with very large, growing, vital congregations. But there were ministries within that church who were in decline on this life cycle, right? So if you're a part of a growing, vital congregation, that may be a ministry in your church that needs to rediscover its why in order to get back to vitality. Are y'all still with me? So rebirth happens when a church makes an intentional decision to re-engage its community. Now, next slide. Now we're talking about, but in order to do that, we need a change in culture, right? Culture change. And there comes a point at which institutions simply cannot be fixed without a massive culture change. You had that culture slide, a major culture change. And for churches, this means an unyielding focus on making disciples of Jesus Christ. Now, I want you, there you go, thank you so very much. Look at this slide. If you look at this slide, you see in the center, it says culture. And that's what we're after. We're after a culture change. This is talking about the DNA of a congregation. And outside of that circle is activities, events, and programs. And then you have the external environment. Where we spend most of our time as leaders are around activities, events, and programs. How do we maintain activities, events, and programs? How do we keep activities, events, and programs going? How do we keep activities, events, and programs happening? How do we keep activities, events, and programs funded? How do we keep activities, events, and programs well attended? We keep focusing on activities, events, and programs. And when we're always focusing on activities, events, and programs, we forget the reason why the activities, events, and programs exist in the first place, right? Again, there's a reason why you've been doing an annual fall festival since the Mississippi was a creek. Because at some point, somebody thought this would be a pretty good idea, not just for the sake of doing it, but for the sake of engaging and reaching new people, right? So what is that missional ethos of evangelism in your context for the 21st century, for 2018, right? And I want to suggest to you as leaders that the greatest place of influence is right there in the center. Right? That is the greatest place of leverage in terms of changing the direction of a local congregation. Right? So this lack of focus happens in every congregation. It happens when the business of doing ministry becomes the ministry. It happens when our activities become more important than our spiritual growth and development and become more valuable than engaging people in our everyday life experiences. Right? So it happens. So what I want you to do is just take a few seconds just to reflect on this slide. And you see the posture of being the church. Dying church folk come to church, they sit in church, they leave. 7 days later, they come to church, they sit in church, they leave. 7 days later, they come to church, they sit in church, they leave. Oh, I'm sorry, this is 2018. The next month, they come to church, they sit, and they leave. Vital church, the going to people, engaging with people, connecting with people, right? It's a different posture, right? So I want you to reflect on this slide again with your neighbor. And what insight do you get from this slide? And what's the posture of your church? What insight do you get from this slide? And what's the posture of your church? Spend a few minutes talking about that. All right. Now, I have to tell you that this is probably one of the most difficult things to do. But it makes all the difference, right? You could, quote unquote, have a successful ministry that's still not on task, right? We used to have when I pastored St. Mark, we had a volleyball league. Sunday nights, Monday nights, and Tuesday nights. And the gym was packed with folk playing volleyball, most folk from the community. On Wednesdays, Thursdays, I believe it was, we had Zumba. I think they still do Zumba. Packed, right? Mainly from folk. It's a mixture of folk, church and community folk. Friday nights had open night gym. Same kind of thing. And I remember being in a staff meeting once, and we were talking about this Family Life Center and all of the things that were going on. And people said, wow, we're packed every night. You know, we got folk packed every single night. And I remember asking this question, so what? And the question that I would regularly ask our leaders, and Vance, you've been at my church, and when I used to pastor that church, and he knows, I would always ask this question, right? What makes this different than what any other nonprofit organization could do? In other words, there has to be some uniqueness about who we are as believers in Christ. In other words, we have to see those events, activities, and programs as the big front door, porch, and we can never lose sight of our task, which is making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Are y'all still with me? Now, we didn't scrap the program, but we did go do some brainstorming to say, okay, now we have folk, they're coming, how do we communicate with them? How do we do this in an intentional way? How do we create intentional invitations? How do we begin this process of introducing them to a life of Christ? So that became, again, keeping the church focused on its why. Now, I've consulted and coached a lot of congregations, and I've seen this over and over again. And not too long ago, I was talking to some leaders, and they had a community breakfast. Right? Anybody do a community breakfast? Right? The community breakfast, Sunday morning breakfast, and they were doing great community breakfast. And the problem was, they said, well, folk are coming for the community breakfast, but they leave. Right? Really? Okay. So the first question is, well, do you know the people that are coming for breakfast? Well, no. Why not? Well, we're too busy, we're serving. Right? Then what would happen if you got a team of folk who didn't serve and who didn't set up tables, but whose sole responsibility it was to connect and get to know the people there? See the difference? You don't scrap the program, but you figure out how does it connect to our intentional system of discipleship. Or in other words, you never lose sight of the fact that this is our why. We're to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. And if you really are sold out to that, then you know that everything we do is an opportunity, right, to introduce people into this discipleship pathway. So to see all the people, how do you see all the people, right, in your community, in your area? Well, it's helpful to start by listening. So we start by listening. And in the book, Engaging the Community, I referenced the book Churchless by George Barner and David Kinnaman. And they drew data from a series of 18 nationwide surveys with adults between 2008 and 2014. And I referenced some research, right? Some conclusions that they came to. And I would invite you to read the book to do that, to see that. But I would caution you to say that this is one perspective. Demographics give us great perspectives. Do you guys do Mission Insight? So if you do Mission Insight is a great tool. As a matter of fact, there are so many bells and whistles to Mission Insight. So if you've never really explored, and you get it free, So you should take advantage of it. It will teach you a lot about your community. As a matter of fact, if you upgrade to certain features of it, you could literally scroll over a neighborhood and it'll tell you the name of the person that lives in that house, and it will tell you what they had for dinner last night. It is pretty scary though, seriously. But it gives you a lot of information, that's my point. But know that this is one perspective, but there's some other things we must do. Like we gotta talk to the community griots. You know, the griots are the storytellers, the city officials, school principals, business owners, you know, barbershop, beauty shops, etc. And as you do all of this, you not only gain pertinent information that can help shape the future of your church, but you also begin to forge relationships with people in the life of the community. And you are building bridges by initiating relationships between the church and the community you serve. So we start by listening. We start by listening. And then we create a strategy for engaging the community, or ways that would be effective in our particular context. What are some effective ways for us to engage our particular community? And you had one example of that last night, which was this, I would define this as a community block party. Right? Another example of that would be prayer walks. And I define prayer walks in the book. There are basically two types of prayer walks. The first type of prayer walk is when a church is going and walking through the community just simply to get a vision from God, discernment. So you're walking the streets and you're praying over houses and you're praying over businesses, and you're just praying, God, give us a vision, a burden for these people, right, for the community. And I always thought it was a very effective thing to do when you go do a prayer walk. Take pictures, right? So just take lots of pictures. And you take those pictures, you bring them back to the church, and just put those pictures all over the church, right? And you have intentional prayer time for this community. And the whole congregation is engaged in saying, Lord, give us a burden for the people. Help us to see the people the way you see them. Help us to see all of the people. Help us to see the people that we ignore. Help us to see the people that are neglected. Help us to see the least and the lost. Help us to see the folk, right, who really need a relationship with you. See, that's one type of prayer walk, and I encourage you to do that. Second type of prayer walk is an active, more active kind of prayer walk. Next slide, please. And in the next active type of prayer walk, it's kind of a more hands-on approach, and church members will gather, and they'll receive a very, very short kind of informal training, and they will literally go out and just knock on doors. Or as you see somebody walking down the street, hey, I want to talk to you for a second. Is there anything I can pray with you about? Right? And you send people out in groups or pairs in order to do that. And that's effective because, number one, people are not used to knowing neighbors anymore, right? And they use this on a regular basis, and a lot of folk will shy away from this because they say, well, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to have the door slammed in my face. Or, you know, I don't want to feel like I'm imposing myself. Right? And can I tell you then, all of the years that I've done and experienced prayer walks, I can say that, at least in our experience, not once has it happened. And people are genuinely overjoyed to have this relationship. They're our neighbors. And it's like, we're your neighbors. We want to just get to know the folk in our neighborhood. And folk respond to that very positively. So if you were to do a prayer walk, do one of these prayer walks early Saturday morning, you divide folk out, you go out into the neighborhood, spend a couple hours, come back, have lunch, and share stories, share testimonies. And people get inspired, right? Get inspired by this experience. Now, for smaller congregations, this is how we did it in the Great Plains Annual Conference in our district. So our district, which was the Wichita East District. In the Wichita East District, we knew we had smaller churches in our district, right? And so what would we do? The district would band together, right? And the district, we would plan a prayer walk for a church, right? On behalf of we would join a local church, and we would literally go to their church on a Saturday morning, right? And help them prayer walk their community. And we just rotated that, right, throughout a season of the year. That way, even a small church could leverage the power of the connection, and all of us who were Methodists and believers were out knocking on the doors and saying, hey, I'm from so-and-so church, and we're your neighbors, and we just want to greet you, and is there anything we can pray with you about? And would you like for us to take a prayer request? Would you like to share more information? Whatever the case. And then we had these little connect cards, and then folk would give us information, and then that became a basis for that particular local church to be able to follow up with folk. That's like a pretty good idea, right? A great way, again, to leverage the power of the connection. Are y'all still with me? All right, so just turn to your neighbor, share just like one aha, revelation, epiphany that you've experienced in the last 13 minutes. All right, go ahead. One. All right. You can find a picture. Find a prayer walk. All right. So it sounds like there's been some revelation. That's good. That's good. Good. Now, I'm often asked, well, how do you train people to do prayer walks? And quite frankly, this is literally how I train people to do prayer walks, because Jesus gave instructions for engaging a community. They're found in Luke 10, verses 1 through 9. This is a Message translation of it. It says, later the master selected 70 and sent them ahead of him in pairs to every town and place where he intended to go. He gave them this charge: what a huge harvest and how few the harvest hands. So on your knees, ask the God of the harvest to send harvest hands. On your way, but be careful. This is hazardous work. You're like lambs in a wolf pack. Travel light, comb and toothbrush and no extra luggage. Don't loiter and make small talk with everyone you meet along the way. In other words, don't get distracted. When you enter a home, greet the family. Peace. If your greeting is received, then it's a good place to stay. But if it is not received, take it back. Get out. Don't impose yourself. right? Stay at one home, taking your meals there, for a worker deserves 3 square meals. I love this. Don't move from house to house looking for the best cook in town. And when you enter a town and are received, eat what they set before you. Heal anyone who is sick, and tell them God's kingdom is right on your doorstep. So there are three principles here I want to share with you. And this is about engagement, right? Initiating these relationships, the types of these relationships. And we see these right from these instructions, that these relationships must be authentic, organic, consistent, right? First, Jesus sends the disciples out with nothing. And I believe the point of this is vulnerability. Because when we are vulnerable, we can be more authentic. Engaging others in ways that build relationships can only be done when we are vulnerable to how God's Spirit and grace will move in the midst of these encounters. In other words, people won't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And I want you to know people still want to be known. And they want to know that you care. Right? They want to be known. People want to be known. In a video experiment conducted on May 17th, 2016, Amnesty Poland set out to recreate psychologist Arthur Aaron's experiment from 20 years prior. And in this experiment, Aaron discovered that 4 minutes of looking into the eyes of another human being without saying a word could bring 2 people closer together. So Amnesty Poland paired refugees with Europeans to test his conclusion. This video attempted to improve the treatment of refugees by Europeans, connecting them with their common humanity. In short, what they were trying to do is help them see all the people. Let's take a look.
Nice mustache. Six, 5. Mit 6, 5.
Are you new in Berlin?
Yeah, 8 months.
And are you alone here or with your family?
No, I don't. This life Sometime nice, sometime not good.
Beatrice.
Hafiz.
Oh my god, I'm keeping my eyes on you. Wow.
Oh.
Hello.
I expect you to ask my number.
Be a strong man.
Thank you so much. We will go to the zoo, maybe next this few days. I will text you if you would like to.
I would love it. Of course. You can do it.
When I was looking into her eyes, I was trying to see what I could tell from the life that she lived, and I think I could tell that there was a lot of experience lived there.
It doesn't matter, look in the eyes or something, just give yourself a chance to talk and to look at the other person.
Yeah. Powerful response, just a simple act of seeing another and being seen by another. And I believe this is what Jesus had in mind when he sent the disciples out with instructions, right? For vulnerability and authenticity, to be fully present in the moment. Perhaps even beginning to see people the way Jesus sees people, see all the people. So relationships must be authentic, right? Authenticity. Secondly, relationships must be organic, This is what happens. Bishop talked about what happened last night. That's the organic nature of ministry. When we're just seeking to engage and initiate these relationships and cultivate these relationships, things happen organically. So we have to be open to the fact that we don't know what's going to happen, right? That surprising things can happen when we open ourselves up and know that others can be a blessing to us, that others can speak into our lives. So we can't go with people with the idea that we're only bringing something to them. Right? But people have gifts to give to us, right? This is the nature of relationships. So in the local church context, we can provide opportunities to connect with our neighbors in ways that build authentic community. And when we commit ourselves to connecting with our neighbors and getting to know them and their stories, there will be very natural openings for people to share their faith. Natural openings for people to share their faith. A few months ago, Discipleship Ministries, we issued a See All the People challenge. And the churches submitted ideas about how they were engaging and connecting with people in the community. And we got received this entry from Radcliffe United Methodist Church in Radcliffe, Kentucky. And when we first saw it, we were kind of skeptical about it because the title of their entry was called Mac Church. Right? Mac Church. Well, nobody wants to go to a church that feels like cheap fast food, okay? But when we looked at the video, we said, wow, man, they're really onto something here. They have made a conscious choice to step outside the four walls of the church and to engage the community. I want you to take a look at their video and notice their strategy. Let's take a look.
Brother Darren and I were meeting on a regular basis, usually on Thursday mornings, and picking different restaurants. And I expressed to him that I had a heart for people that are off-shift workers, because I am an off-shift worker. And so he said, well, why don't we just start a Bible study in one of these restaurants? And so we did, and we migrated around a little bit, and God settled us here.
Sort of organically, folks began to come over to our table, and just the church sort of sprang up. So it's a blessing. It's part of our weekly worship services. One of our phrases is, make church is church.
We always have a little Bible lesson. We always have prayer. Quite often we do communion here. A few months ago we actually had 2 baptisms here, which was a beautiful experience.
I've been baptized by Brother Darren, by him. So I like it to come here at Thursday.
Sometimes some of the people from the church will show up here, and just we never know who's going to be here for sure.
It's exciting. It's new. I never expected all this. We had communion, and it's just breakfast together, and it's just nice.
We're just so excited about what the Lord's doing. We're just seeing the Lord work in marvelous ways. And the great thing is, any Christians can do this, to go and hang out, to buy some breakfast, to bless some employees, to pray over the place, and just to be present.
Our ultimate goal is just to serve the Lord in whatever way He calls us. This is a simple way to just share your faith. This whole thing just started with 2 guys crazy enough to bring a couple Bibles to McDonald's.
I love that. 2 guys crazy enough to bring some Bibles to McDonald's. And what I really like about that it was started, that it was initiated by the laity, right? 2 guys crazy enough to bring some Bibles to McDonald's. I mean, that's the spontaneous nature, right, of ministries and being in relationships that are authentic, organic relationships. I've been talking about this corporate aspect, right, of this discipleship and engaging a community. So when we talk about block parties and prayer walks and those sort of things, that's the corporate aspect of it, right? And this is the individual, the personal aspect of it. This is understanding, my call as a believer in Christ and leveraging my relationships, understanding that I'm in strategic relationships. Wonderful type of ministries emerge that way when we're willing to think creatively and think outside of the box. One of our most successful small groups was a small group that was not started by the small groups planning team. It was not initiated by the group of folk that gather every year and try to figure out and brainstorm which groups we're going to offer to the congregation or community for this upcoming year. It was started by one person who had a need and said, I think, I really would like to connect with people who are single parents. I'm a single parent, and there has to be other single parents here, right, that I can connect to. And she said, you know what she did? She just went on Facebook, and she said, I'm creating a group. If you'd like to meet me to talk about what it means, the issues facing single parents, meet me at this location. And 8 people showed up, beginning of a small group, spontaneous, right? And that's the personal aspect, understanding that, hey, I have a responsibility to make disciples. And so there's a corporate aspect that I participate in, but there's also some personal leverage that I can bring to the table. So relationships have to be authentic, organic, and the last is consistent. Jesus says, don't move from house to house. In other words, spend time with the people we encounter. Another way to say this is be fully present. In a world in which so much is transactional, people appreciate those who offer love in consistent, non-transactional ways, right? And you can always, can't you always tell the difference? Like if you're out somewhere, maybe you're in an airplane or you're in a grocery store or whatever, and somebody introduces themselves to you and they try to connect with you. Can't you always tell the difference between somebody who just genuinely wants to get to know who you are versus somebody who's trying to sell you something? It takes about a nanosecond to figure that out, right? Authenticity, right? Organic, consistent. Right, being fully present with people. And so I am convinced that people in our generation are attracted to Christ, not simply persuaded to Christ, folk not arguing to the kingdom, but they are drawn by the love of God when we model and communicate it in visibly consistent ways. So engagement includes a corporate and personal dimension of discipleship. The corporate aspect includes everything a church does to foster developing relationships and inviting people into discipleship opportunities. The personal dimension of discipleship also must be an integral part of the church's ethos. This is the investment of developing relationships over a significant period of time. Are y'all still with me? All right, so I'm gonna give you a couple minutes to reflect on this question. Next slide, please. What's the difference between offering a program to those in you don't have that slide, to those in your community versus developing relationships? Reflect on that question. What's the difference between offering a program to those in your community versus developing relationships? Spend a few minutes around that question. What's the difference between offering a program to those in your community versus developing relationships? Okay. Now, have attention one more second here. This is what I want you to do, because we all process things a little differently, but I want you to remember something. I want you to remember that leadership is an activity, not a position. Okay? Leadership is an activity, not a position. And so I want you to think about what you can do as a leader, a meaningful next step you can take over the next 7 days. I don't want you to think a year. I want you to think over the next, what is one meaningful step I can take over the next 7 days that will help my church actively engage its community? I don't want you to talk right now. I want you to think about the answer to that question and write it down. Okay, just write it down, one meaningful step. I'm going to give you about a minute to do that, to think about that. I'll give you a couple minutes to think about that. And then you'll be able to share what your meaningful next step is with your neighbor. And hopefully, you know this person, they'll hold you accountable. So, hey, call me in 7 days and ask me if I did this, okay? It could be I'm going to convene a meeting. It could be a strategic conversation. It could be I'm going to bring together a group of like-minded people to go through the Engage in the Community book. It could be I'm going to bring together people. We're going to plan a community block party. It could be I'm just giving you some ideas here, but this has to be something you're willing to give energy to, right? So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes just to write down a meaningful next step that you can take. Okay, now that you've written it down, now talk to your neighbor and tell him what that step is. Can you hear me? You will not. All right. Now, hopefully, prayerfully, you're going to take that meaningful next step. Amen? Amen? All right. This is the first time I've ever done this. This is the spontaneous nature of speaking and the organic nature of ministry. And I like trying crazy stuff every now and then, all right? I have a person on the phone. This is Pastor Rhonda Kingwood. She is the lead pastor for the St. Mark Southeast Campus. And I've asked her, I'm going to interview her, but I've asked her to share a word about a particular engagement weekend that this church did this past February. It was called Love You to Life, and it was connected around Valentine's Day, all right? Love You to Life. So, Rhonda, are you there?
Yes.
Ah, I feel like Oprah, or, like, yes. So Everybody say, hi, Pastor Kingwood.
Well, hello, everyone.
So tell us about the Love Your Life weekend, how it came about.
Well, I had a conversation with someone that talked about a concept that they did in Texas. And so we decided to take that concept and develop it here for the Southeast campus. And so what I did was I went around the February Valentine's month and decided to do a Love You to Life weekend. And so what we wanted to do was take that and go out and love our neighbor and show love in the community. And a part of that was just putting together with the church, letting people be able to go out and be the disciple that we're supposed to be and to disciple others by going out and showing love to our community.
So what particular events did you do?
So some of the events that we did on that Friday, we have adopted a school in our community. And so on that Friday, what we decided to do is to give out $5 Starbucks cards to all of the teachers and administrators. And so the only one that knew about it was the principal of the school. And so we got donations and got about 85 Starbucks cards. And we went into the school that morning and we decided to just knock on every door and go in and just love on the teachers. Let them know that we appreciated what they were doing for our children in the neighborhood. And we presented them with a $5 Starbucks card and said, go have coffee on us. And so it was really an exciting adventure on that Friday. And what happened was the news got a hold of it. And they came out and kind of followed us around and got interviews from some of the teachers and from us. But what we didn't know was that they had something in store for us. And so as we came back around to the front of the building, they stopped us and said, Pastor, you've been surprising people here. We want to surprise you. And so we have a group here called Devon James, which is a lawyer group, but they also have a 501c, which is a Helping Hands group. And so they came and surprised us and presented us with a check for $1,500 to say that we want you to continue in this ministry.
Somebody ought to give God praise for that.
So that was very exciting piece right there, and we were on the news, and it just did something for us. Not that, you know, they gave us the $1,500, but that they saw what we were doing in the community as a church. So
Wonderful. And then what happened on Saturday?
now on Saturday, what we did, and I need to go back just a little bit. What I did to get us ready for this is I got a big Culligan jar. You know, when you have Culligan water. And so I got this big Culligan jar and I put it out in the front of the church. And I said to the church, everyone will not be able to go out that weekend and everybody will not be able to be at the laundromat and be here and be there. But you can help us by just putting your change in this Culligan jar. And so for about 5 weeks, we just had the Culligan jar out and people just brought their change or dollars or whatever and they put it in this jar. And so when we got ready for this weekend and counted it, we had raised $575 just for the laundromat ministry.
And what's the laundromat ministry?
And so what that is called Loads of Love. And so
This is awesome stuff, right? Y'all, now this is all stuff for free. It's going to be in my next book, though, but she's getting, I'm sorry, hold up. Go ahead, Rhonda.
I'm sorry, what'd you say?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. And so this, what we did was on that Saturday morning, we had pods of people all over the community. And so at 8 o'clock in the morning, we did loads of love. We went to a laundromat. We took the quarters and we bagged them up, and we did like 3 loads in one baggie. Or 4 loads, I'm not sure, I don't remember. And then what we would do is when people walked in, we just told them that we would like to pay for their laundry. And of course, we got all kinds of looks like, no thank you. And we just, we just let them know that we're not asking for anything, we just want to bless you.
Non-transactional.
They would be like, thank you so much. And we would give them a card that said who we were. And we didn't try to push anything on them. We just said, this is who we are. These are some of the things that are happening, and we just want to bless you. And from that, we got testimonies that were so powerful. And if I could say just one testimony on that piece, there was a lady that had just moved here from Virginia. And she said when she came in, she had all these clothes, and she said she walked in the door and said, Lord, I don't know how I'm going to wash all these clothes because I only have enough money for a couple of loads. She said, and then this angel just came to me and said, I want to pay for your laundry. And she was just in tears. And so we just praise God for that.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You got one more story?
Yes. So we did like 4 things on that Saturday morning. I had people that were doing laundromat. I had young adults, millennials, that went out. We have a park, and there was probably about 100 to 150 homeless people, and they went out and they we had bags of toiletry and food, and they gave it out. And what was so great about that ministry was that they gave out everything, and it was these young adults on their own that said, you know what, we're going to go back to the store. They went and bought another about $150 worth of stuff and sat in their cars, bagged it all up, came back to the park, and gave out. By that time, I had got there, and they were giving out more stuff because they just didn't want people to not have. And we ended up doing prayer and singing and praying for people. It was an awesome ministry. And when I interviewed the young adults that afternoon, they were just like, it just touched our heart to be able to help and to be able to pray for people. So it was an awesome event for them. And then we did the senior citizens, the nursing home. We did cookies and milk and cards, and we took our keyboard and we did music with them. And then we gave suckers to the kids on the hospital floor. So we just had a whole weekend of being in the community, showing love.
That's awesome. Thank you so very much, Pastor Kingwood. All right, we'll holler at you later, all right? All right, bye. So those are some examples, right, of what a church can do in terms of engaging the community. Now, they don't have a large budget, don't have a whole, it's not like folk are knocking down the walls to volunteer, but it doesn't take a lot of money. It just takes a desire and a willingness. And to also know that you're not limited to the people that are within your church, that you can connect with folk who are out in the community, who would love to be a part of ministries that are seeking to engage and build relationships. For instance, last night, you do a Connect card. One of the questions which could have been on the Connect card was, I would like to volunteer to help plan a similar event in the future, right? So now you've just enlarged your ministry pool, right? Are y'all still with me? Are y'all still with me? Now, I just want to say to you, I know it's not easy. I know sometimes you face a lot of obstacles. We minister on a shoestring budget. We don't have a whole lot of people, but I believe that everything we need to fulfill the vision that God has given us is already in the house. How many of you believe that? I believe that. I'll close with this story. Mike was a a former assistant coach for the Auburn football program. And he was going on a recruiting trip with the coach. And they go on this recruiting trip, and Mike says to the coach, "Coach, what kind of player are we looking for?" And the coach says, "Well, there's a kind of player that if you knock him down, he stays down." And Mike says, "We're not looking for that kind of player, are we?" He said, "No, Mike, we're not looking for that kind of player." And then, what kind of player are we looking for? The coach says, "Well, then that's the kind of player that if you knock him down, he gets back up again. And if you knock him down, he gets back up again. And if you knock him down, well, he'll maybe stay down a third time." And then coach says, "We're not looking for that kind of player, are we, coach?" He says, no, we're not looking for that kind of player." "What kind of player are we looking for, coach?" He said, "There's the kind of player when you knock him down, he gets back up. You knock him down, gets back up. You knock him down, he gets back up. You knock him down, he gets back up." And Mike says, "That's the kind of player we're looking for, huh, coach?" And the coach says, "No, Mike, we're looking for the guy that's knocking everybody down." Friends, can I tell you, we serve a God who will knock down every obstacle in your way. He will knock down every wall that gets erected, will knock down every door that's closed in your face. We serve a God who can do all things, everything but fail. And guess what? We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. Do you believe it today? Do you believe it today? Come on, put your hands together, give God praise. Thank you so very much, Bishop. It's been wonderful. God bless you.
And just stay here a minute. Haven't you enjoyed Dr. Dotson? He has helped us take our ministry and thinking about discipleship and the people we need to reach for Christ a next step, and I hope you have heard the challenge. Hope you have heard the challenge. Well, you can't get away from West Virginia without some Hall's chocolates, right? Woo-hoo. And you can't get away from West Virginia without a little West Virginia glass.
All right.
Okay, so we can, that's right. Well, and if we need, I know you're going to have to hop a plane here. If we need to wrap this and send this to you, if you would like to open it, you can.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let me do it.
No, go right ahead. Go ahead. So if we need to send this to you, I'm sure that we can work with you to package this up and send this to you.
This is so beautiful. Wow. Definitely have a spot for it, too. All right. Thank you so much.
Well, and Dr. Dotson is actually, we are very thankful he's been with us for the last 2 days. He's going to be leaving here soon to catch a plane out of Pittsburgh, I think, for his next engagement. Yes. And so, but before you leave, and we will take a break, but we wanted him, because he's helped us with this discipleship and see all the people, we wanted him to be present as we do the One Matters Award. So I'm going to invite Amy Shanholzer and another one of our beloved people from West Virginia, Vance Ross, to come and be a part of this One Matters Award.
All right.
Sisters and brothers, good morning. On behalf of Discipleship Ministries and all the good people at Discipleship Ministries, including present now, my General Secretary, Junius B. Dotson. Didn't he kill the room just now? Didn't he do his thing? Yeah, he did. We are pleased to present here with you and to partner with West Virginia Annual Conference and with you, Bishop, in giving the One Matters Award. In 2015, we began giving One Matters Awards in partnerships with annual conferences. The church that receives this will receive this plaque and will also receive $1,000 to be helpful to them in ministry and an incentive toward what it is they're doing. The One Matters Award is about, my sisters and brothers, recognizing a church that has gone from 0 professions of faith to at least 1. Because you see, one life, one spirit, one soul before Jesus matters. Yes, yes, yes. Yes, indeed. And so it is our privilege and our pleasure to be in partnership with your marvelous Bishop Sue Steiner Ball, to be in partnership with Amy and your Connectional Ministries team. So sisters and brothers, please, we're going to hand this over now to Amy so she can introduce this marvelous congregation.
Well, it's our joy and pleasure to tell you about a pretty special church today. The Dallas United Methodist Church, way up a tiny little twisty road north of Wheeling in the Northern District. So for the last 3 years, in 2015, they went from 0 professions of faith to 32. Then in 2016, they had 17 more professions of faith. And in 2017, they had 14 more. So Deborah Coble and I went up and spent an evening with them and said, so tell us about your church. And we've got a video to let them tell you about their church.
My name is Lisa Fox. I'm the pastor of Dallas and Sand Hill United Methodist Church. And I'm just thankful to be part of the movement to change the world. I'm just thankful to be a part of what God is doing here on the hills of West Virginia. And I just want to be known as a church that prays.
There was someone who had become a member here. Her name was Chrissy, and she insisted every time I saw her, you have to come to church with me, you have to come to church with me. And a month later, she convinced somebody else, come to church with me. And so I met her. Her name's Krista. And now the 3 of us are inseparable. And when we get together, the first news we share, what's going on with church.
And I hadn't been in the church in a very long time. And my first thought when I walked through the door was I hoped I didn't get struck by a bolt of lightning because it had been such a long time. And I had never been baptized, and I had done a lot of personal study and growth, I think, but there was something missing. Impressed by the warmth of everyone, shocked to meet me for the first time, having lived here for 15 years and no one knew I existed because I didn't participate in churches or anything. And when I came back from seminary that Sunday, I was just so excited that I just proposed to the church to be in prayer at 7:14 a.m. and 7:14 p.m. And we've been doing that for 3 years. And there's a bunch of us that are doing it. We set our alarms on our phones. When we